I just returned from seeing Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. In this review, I'll share my thoughts on the movie, but before that, just so you know where I'm coming from, I'll let you know what Star Wars means to me and my expectations going in. Then I'll share what I thought about the movie itself, as well as some specific moments in it, which led me to feel the way I do about it. So there will be spoilers. About these spoilers, I can, by the way, confirm what you probably already knew by now, that pretty much all the leaks, and this applies to the rumors too, which were reported by Doomcock, Jedi Praxis on Reddit, ourselves, and others over the course of the past few months, were indeed spot on. Just because we report something as rumors doesn't preclude it from being accurate. It now turns out that everyone who said the rumors had to be bullshit because they were rumors were wrong. It was all true. It was all horribly true, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. If you follow this channel, you'll have heard this before, but if you're new here, you should know that as a Star Wars fan, I'm about as casual as it gets. I knew of Star Wars growing up, but I didn't see the Star Wars movies until I was in my late teens. By then, it was too late. Without any foundation in childhood nostalgia. I ended up liking Star Wars just fine. I respect Star Wars for its place in pop culture and the perfection with which it distilled archetypes and story structures. But I have no emotional attachment to it. That is not to say I'm entirely without bias. Rise of Skywalker marks the first time I'm genuinely excited about seeing a Star Wars movie, but alas, it's for all the wrong reasons. While I don't have much attachment to the Star Wars brand itself, I do cover genre productions and their behind-the-scenes machinations, and in that regard, Rise of Skywalker has been an incredibly interesting case study. And since I lack that emotional attachment which would have made it painful to cover, it's also been an incredibly entertaining case study to behold. Because of everything we've heard, I expect the movie to be bad. If by some miracle my expectations are subverted and I end up having fun with this though, I'll be the first to admit it. So, with those acknowledgements out of the way, what did I feel about Rise of Skywalker? There are two ways to look at this. No, actually, in order to be fair, you have to look at this from two different points of view. The first is the movie itself. From a purely standalone point of view, of ignoring everything else surrounding it, and just looking at the movie itself, it's a mess. There, that's my opinion. To be more specific, it's a Frankensteinian abomination, consisting of largely pointless action set pieces, quests for MacGuffins, forced character relations and interactions, story contrivances, and several deus ex machinas, all of which were stitched together in order to begin, advance, and conclude a story in the allocated running time. I'm not saying there isn't any good in it, there is, but from a purely standalone perspective, that is what the movie amounts to. A mess, which I doubt very much will go down all that well with the audience. That being said, it's not fair to view the movie purely as a standalone movie, because there is so much more to it. All the shortcomings of Rise of Skywalker, or nearly all at any rate, are a direct result of the creative choices Rian Johnson made and Kathleen Kennedy approved of in The Last Jedi. Yes, it all comes back to that. Rian Johnson didn't just subvert the audience's expectations in that movie. He dismissed all mystery boxes that Abrams had planted in The Force Awakens, and he tied up nearly all loose ends. In some sense, The Last Jedi wasn't just Episode 8, it was Episode 8 and 9, because it effectively ended the trilogy one movie early. What that meant is that in the actual Episode 9, a whole new story had to be set up, one which had to try to get out of the corner Rian Johnson had painted it into. Not only did it have to set the story up, it had to progress it and conclude it, all while working around Rian Johnson's earlier subversion for the sake of subversion. And you know what? It could have worked. If the story presented in this movie had been spread across 2 or even 3 movies, we'd be having a very different conversation right about now. But instead, all of this, alongside a ton of really unsatisfying action, has been crammed into one movie. That puts the pacing and the narrative all out of whack, and that, in turn, is Rise of Skywalker's downfall as a standalone movie. To this end, there are 3 things I want to highlight. In my view, the single most selfish thing Rian Johnson did in The Last Jedi was leave Episode 9 in the situation of having to deal with a very much so alive General Leia, while knowing full well that actress Carrie Fisher was no longer alive to film any new scenes. What they did in Episode 9 was recycle earlier footage from the cutting room floor and try to work that into the movie as best as they could. They did their best, and I don't think anyone could have done any better. But you are still left with a movie where all the other characters talk exposition at Leia, while she comes across as not fully aware of her surroundings before delivering an ill-fitting response. That certainly took me out of the movie, and a lot of screen time was used this way. Of course, they had no other choice but to do this given where Last Jedi left things off, but they needed that screen time elsewhere. No matter how polite he may appear in his public discourse, J.J. Abrams is pissed at Rian Johnson. You can totally tell from the movie. One thing is of course Rey's parentage. In The Last Jedi, Kylo gleefully told Rey, "Your parents were nobodies and they abandoned you." In this movie, he's like, "Oh, but I forgot to mention, your parents were nobodies by choice. See, your dad was actually Palpatine's son, and they didn't quite abandon you either. There is more to it." After she learns of this, Rey has a moment of doubt and goes to that middle-of-nowhere planet with the porgs where Luke Skywalker hid, and his Force Ghost catches up with her. She tells him something along the lines of, "I now understand why you hid like such a recluse. Now I'm gonna do the same thing." To which Luke's Force Ghost replies something along the lines of, "Yeah, but I was wrong. Sorry about that. Don't repeat my mistake. Go out there and take care of business." It's not complete redemption, but I guess it's something. How Holdo sacrificed herself and took down a destroyer didn't sit well with fans, but this is addressed in the movie too. At one point in the movie, someone, I think it might have been that Hobbit guy, suggests repeating the Holdo maneuver, but Finn quickly shuts him up. That was 1,000,000 to 1 shot. Fuck that shit. Let's never speak of it again. The irony, though, is that for all the crap this movie has to deal with because of The Last Jedi, the only thing that can pass for good in it was also introduced in The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi introduced Rey and Kylo's ability to force sext one another, and that is taken to a new level here, because now they can even force teleport things to and from one another, which is well used. In fact, the Force can do all sorts of things we hadn't seen before. You can't Force heal though, but you can use the Force to send some of your own life force to someone else, and that works much the same way. The biggest thing the Force does here though is emphasize the relation between Rey, Kylo, and Palpatine. It's a complete break with anything we've ever seen the Force do before, but what it does is make the relation between those 3 work. And those are the only relations that actually do work in the whole movie. And more importantly, it humanizes Rey. Yes, that's right. Rey is humanized. From all the leaks, one could easily get the impression that Rey would continue to be the bestest ever and a complete and total Mary Sue. But by altering what the Force can do, this is actually changed within the context of the film. Here we learn that the only reason Rey was ever so special and so gifted in the Force is because of Kylo, and the super duper ultra rare Force link between them, a quirk of the Force that only happens once every few centuries. And when the propped up corpse that is Palpatine takes that from them, Rey does defeat him, but not on her own. She needs the help of all the Jedi that Force channel through her. To me, this was the highlight of the movie. Not all that Force drivel, of course, that was pretty stupid when you think about it, but it was a means to give Rey a character and a character arc, which is just about the only thing I felt Rise of Skywalker succeeded at. Even her appropriating the name Skywalker, thereby rejecting Palpatine and his dark side legacy, kind of worked within the context of the movie. The movie is still a mess, there is no getting around that. But it could never have been anything else, given the corner The Last Jedi had painted it into. This is a movie which will be discussed and dissected for a long time, such as in the spoilerific live show which follows this video that you'll find linked in the description. For now though, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comments.